Okay, up nice and high up here. It's good to see everyone in the audience. Hi everyone, welcome tonight. My name is Sarah. I'm the independent facilitator for tonight. I also was the independent facilitator for the last session in December, so I can see lots of familiar faces, so welcome back to tonight. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and lands on which we're meeting. So Bayside City Council proudly acknowledges the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners and custodians of this land. We pay respect to their elders, past, present and emerging, as well as any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people in the room here today. We're going to start with some quick housekeeping and then I'm going to hand over to the Mayor, Councillor Al Muwallim, to welcome us as well. So as last time, if you were here at the last session, there's a really big group of us tonight, plus people online. So this session is being live streamed. And so we'll do the same thing as we did last time with questions, where we'll scan the QR code and we'll ask questions online. And those questions will be filtered through to me by the Bayside team. So if you need any assistance with that, if you pop up your hand, someone from council will come over and help you with that process as well. So the information tonight will really be, we know there's lots of concerns, there's questions, so tonight will just be an information gathering opportunity for you all, and will be the first part of further engagement that's happening through April and May as well. If you haven't already done so, please turn your mobile phone on silent and take note of the emergency exits towards the back of the room and follow the Bayside Council team out in the case of an emergency. As I said, the event will be live streamed, so request that there's no personal photography or filming. You'll be able to see this event once it's concluded. You'll be able to see the live stream online as well. So this is the QR code. So you'll have the QR code on your seats if you're in the room. Online, you'll see the QR code on your screen as well. So you can start asking questions now or at any time throughout this session, and they'll be recorded as we go. So now I'd like to welcome up Mayor Councillor Al Muwallim for some opening remarks. Thanks, Mayor. You are? Great, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you everyone for attending this evening. So I'm Councillor Hannah Al Muwallim. I'm the Mayor of Bayside and the Ward Councillor for the Dendy Ward, which is part of Brighton. First of all, thank you for joining us tonight for the second Bayside Community Forum on the Victorian Government planning reforms. And good evening to those watching via live streaming. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge my fellow councillors here this evening, and we start the first row, the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Debbie Taylor-Haynes. The second row, we got Councillor Andrew Hockley, and somewhere in the back I can see him, Councillor Jeff Lee. I also like to acknowledge the attendance of our federal MP, Zoe Daniel, federal member for Goldstein. And we have received 2 apologies from James Newbury, member for Brighton, and Brad Roswell, member for Sandringham. The purpose of tonight is to provide our community with the opportunity to hear about the proposed planning reforms and how it will affect our Bayside community. I lived in Bayside for over 25 years now and have seen many changes over the last 25 years. I personally live around the activity centre of Church Street, and I have seen over the last 10-15 years the increase in density there and how Bayside Council was delivering on the structure plans in that area. So there is no doubt that the scope of change foreshadowed by the Victorian Government planning reform is going to have a significant impact on our beloved Bayside suburb in the same way the activity centre program, the precinct plans in Bayside also changed the activity centres. So this is why it's important to work with the state government to ensure the best outcome for our community. And part of working with state government and the journey is education. And as such, we have brought together a panel of representatives from the Victorian Government to explain the rationale and the strategy behind the reforms and how they could impact or will impact our community. I'd like to welcome the panel and thank you for coming here and joining us tonight. And I'm looking forward to actually learning from your expertise and understanding the reasoning behind the changes. So tonight, it's not a political forum here. It's more a forum to understand about the changes and what's proposed So I really hope that everyone is kind and respectful. So I'd like to finish here, and hopefully we can keep respectful, because I know there's lots of concerns in the community, but it's not the forum to vent these out. It's the forum to understand the changes and how they are going to affect us. So thank you.
Okay, so the way tonight will work is, again, for those who were here last time, similar process where we're going to have presentations first. So we'll have speakers from across different programs, from government departments, and then we'll go into the panel question and answer time. So again, you can start submitting questions both online, in person, through the QR code at any point. So firstly, I'd like to invite up Lester Townsend, Director, Plan for Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to start off with some broad framing about where we are, I see, in Victoria's planning journey, and tell you a bit about how we produced a plan for Victoria, which is the 30-year plan for all of Victoria, what it means in some of the detail, give you a brief taste of what the actions are. So a plan for Victoria, it's about inclusive, livable, sustainable, prosperous and enriching. And that's enriching for in your personal life, prosperous economy, sustainable environment, livable places and inclusive community. More importantly, we say, and this is from our website, this is a plan for Victoria written by Victorians. And I'll come to that because it really is, and certainly the clear intention of the Minister for Planning, that it is a plan that was very much influenced by Victorians, but the change Victorians were part of. So it's really thinking about a new way or a change in the way planning has happened in the state. So from 1959 thereabouts to 1987, when we got a new Planning Act, we very much had an engineering-led approach to planning. And we might say that was characterised by narrow thinking, but bold actions. For the last 30 years, we've had a policy-led sort of approach. We've had broad thinking, and that's been great, but it's essentially been regulation driven, and we haven't really always baked in implementation into our plans. And so the 1954 plan, which was the first metropolitan plan for Melbourne that was implemented, the 1969 freeway plan, which set out our long-term freeway network, were the engineering approach. And then in recent times, you might have heard of Plan Melbourne, before that Melbourne 2030, before that Living Suburbs. So we've had a plan about every 10 years. So they were regulation driven. A plan for Victoria takes that broad thinking of that we now consider all that from environment to personal experience, but it focuses on actions. So somebody has PDF'd my PowerPoint, and so all the animations have been lost. So engineering, roads, sewer and other facilities, that was an engineering approach, and that's a clip from the 1954 plan. This woman's difficulty is typical of what thousands of Melbourne housewives suffer today because of the city's unguided sprawl has meant homes without made roads, sewerage and other facilities. They were pretty concerned about the experience of housewives in 54. What we've got in the current policy-led is Plan for Plans, and probably usefully, it covers up what's currently on our website, which says Planning 101, planning is about creating plans. And we want to shift from that policy-led planning is about plans for planning's sake, move towards creating places that are inclusive, deliver for communities, that protect what we love about where we live, work, play and raise our families. So this is that shift. Why did we shift? This is the engineering approach. It was solving problems. This photo is from a barricade across the Alexander Parade about when they sought to open the Eastern Freeway back in the early 70s or the mid 70s. It was a standoff for about 3 weeks. You'll see some graffiti there. Hamer wets his bed. That was a very cutting remark against the Premier at the time. And over to the side, a slightly cropped Rakoff Rafferty, he was the Transport Minister. So this is where we were in the engineering phase. There was a lot of pushback from communities. Planning, which part of that profession, was delivering things that people didn't want. As part of that, we moved to the policy-led. So we moved to looking and thinking about individuals, but we did that in terms of regulating change. Planners thought about what people want, but we didn't necessarily deliver. We are now in a community-led phase where we think about the community, we think about the place, and we consider the future is a place we are creating. It's not a place we're going to. So it's about people in places. So engineering, we concreted the creeks. Policy-led, we wrote screeds about what you should do with creeks. Community-led, we start doing works to improve. And this is both creeks are Moonee Ponds Creek, and the middle one is the restoration works the government's done. Housing, the engineering-led, you'll be familiar with the high-rise towers. They were common all around the world. The policy-led was the post-modern architecture. The community-led is example of the better quality homes that we see today. So Plan for Victoria, community-led. Action-oriented. So it's based on the notion on the stages we went through of understand, imagine, act, learn. So in terms of understand, we engaged, we reached 110,000 people across Victoria. We had submissions and feedback items, 15,000 feedback items. We engaged with young people, we engaged with multicultural communities. One of the biggest engagement processes ever undertaken. We did analysis. So we took the 2.24 million homes that we need by 2050 or thereabouts, and worked out where were the best places across Victoria to deliver those 2.24 million homes where people would have good access to opportunities and service, good access to jobs. So instead of taking in the past, our current policy was a sort of just keep doing what you're doing. We stepped back, we looked at what do we need to create capacity for in planning schemes? Where's the best place for that? We envisaged a future. We had a deliberative engagement process where we had 49 people who were volunteer. We asked people at random. We had 49 volunteers. We had more than that. We had to cull it down to 49, who over 2 weekends listened to experts, talked amongst themselves and wrote the vision for the plan. By 2050, Victoria will be a vibrant, accessible and connected community, valued for its diverse cultures, sustainable environmental practices and respect for First Peoples of Victoria. And it goes on, we'll create a society that caters for the unique needs of all Victorians, nurturing individual health through physical and cultural recreation. And as I say, these were ordinary people ranging, I think the youngest was about 19, the oldest was in his 70s. There people who'd been in Melbourne for 3 months, people who had been in Melbourne for 70 years, talking together across that broad cross-section of Victoria, regional people, city people, to come up with a shared vision. And the Minister has committed to introduce this vision into all planning schemes in Victoria. We set the direction. So the team produced a framework plan for Melbourne to build on that vision that is reflected in the vision that we have for Melbourne and where we might see growth and change in Melbourne. But we also set the direction for Geelong, Ballarat, Bendigo. We built actions. So our actions are under 5 pillars: housing for all Victorians, accessible jobs and services, great places, suburbs and towns, sustainable environments, and self-determination and caring for country. And it's an action plan. There are 22 actions. So under self-determination and caring for country, about getting First Peoples thinking and approaches and culture better reflected in planning schemes, but also making the system fairer in some very technical specific ways for traditional owners. Perhaps what is on the front of a lot of people's minds is housing for all Victorians. We will implement the housing targets for every local government. But what that means is that housing target, we will work with council, and the activity centre program is a subset of that implementation to ensure that the planning scheme has that capacity to deliver the homes. They're not a target for actual building. That's a sort of a set separate issue. They're about making sure we have the capacity in planning schemes across Victoria to deliver those homes. We'll look to get a better implementation of transport network policy into planning schemes, particularly things which we've neglected in the past, such as improving our bus network, to set out that long-term vision in a concrete way that can be achieved over time. And we'll streamline community infrastructure and development contributions, though that's work that requires policy choices to be made. It requires potentially some changes to legislation. We'll protect and enhance our canopy trees, and we've set a target of 30% tree canopy cover across the metropolitan area, across urban areas. We'll update urban design guidelines to deliver better public places, and my team's already begun that work. And we'll encourage walking and cycling, because if we move to more people living in Melbourne, we want to reduce. We don't want the future residents of Melbourne to have to drive as much, because that puts us, that's not good for all of us. So we want the opportunity for people on short trips to walk and cycle, but also for the medium trips to reduce the amount of time or the length they need to travel by car, or make use of the trains, the public transport, the ones we have and the ones we're building. And we'll improve the environmental sustainability of development. But it's not simply about the actions, it's also about learning. We are committed to monitor and evaluate and feed that back through. So unlike those earlier plans I spoke of, which is every 10 years, here's your plan, and another 10 years, here's your plan, is a commitment to it being a living plan that will be constantly updated, constantly refined. And so it's the deliberate choice that the 22 actions are actions that most can be delivered this year. The outliers are delivered by within 2 years, and the expectation is we'll keep doing immediate actions to deliver on that community vision. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lester. A lot of information to take in. So feel free, you've got notes on your and writing instruments on your seat as well. So if you need to take notes or, would like to record any questions, please do as we go. I'd now like to invite up David Cowan, Director of Activity Centre Program. Thanks, David.
Thanks and good evening, everyone. David representing the Activity Centre program. I'll talk you through a bit of information about the program. Let me know. I'll discuss a little bit what's planned for those future centres and about how we're going to engage with the community. So an activity centre in, I guess it's planning speak, is those locations where there's shops, employment, services, where I guess we access our daily needs. There's a bit of a description there, and that's what we'll be focusing on, particularly on the ones with great public transport, which enable people to easily and efficiently access other activity centres where they might be employed or need to go to shops or go to a hospital or go to university. So that's what the program focuses on, and that's because Plan for Vic made it very clear that the population growth that we need to accommodate, the best way, the most sustainable and efficient way to accommodate housing for the future population is at locations in activity centres and around public transport. So the activity centre plan will be looking at these 50 centres, including 5 more that are within the Bayside area, and it will look at the core activity centre, which essentially refers to the traditional non-residential land, so where the shops and offices will be. It'll also look at a broader walking catchment. So 800 metres has been used as a rule of thumb to date. So that's, I guess, residents that primarily residential land that can walk into the centre and can access a train station near that centre without using a car. So we'll be looking at both of those areas, and we'll also be working on infrastructure contributions to help fund as development occurs. Developers pay infrastructure contributions that can help fund improvements in those areas. So the core will be the more the higher intensity uses, and it will include non-residential uses. It will also include residential and mixed use, so where there might be shops at the ground level and residential apartments above. So in many of these activity centres, and in Moorabbin in particular, you'll be seeing, and the plan proposes 6 to 12 stories in development. There's no change to existing heritage overlay and heritage places across these locations. And there will be infrastructure charging from January 2027. Stepping out from the centre, the broader catchment area has been divided into the inner catchment, which is primarily 4 stories with some 6 stories on larger sites. And then the outer catchment area is primarily 3 stories with some 4-story development allowed on larger sites. So this is a diagram from the fact sheet that was released for Moorabbin. Focus on that for a little bit. So it identifies where that outer catchment is in the light purple, the inner catchment in the darker purple closer to the centre is where I guess medium-rise residential development will be supported. And then in around the shops and the train station, there'll be a range of different building typologies or built form typologies. So that will support some tower development in the best sites, larger sites up to 12 stories, but primarily it'll be in that 6 to 8 story range. So this is just the planning rules for if future development occurs. These are the standards that development will be assessed against. I guess those typologies also have a range of other rules and guidance that will come out in the plan in the very near future. So moving on from the pilot program, the government has asked us to look at another 50 centres across Melbourne, and those have been identified in the plan for Victoria, and there's a map here that illustrates some of those. The purple centres are all the ones identified in the activity centre program, and as you can see, there's a fair lot, quite a large number that our program needs to start to plan for over the next 18 months. And they include, as part of the first round, primarily occurring this year in 2025, North Brighton, Middle Brighton, Hampton and Sandringham. And then at the end of the year and into next year, we'll start looking at Elstonwick. So as we move to plan for these next 5 centres in Bayside, there'll be a number of phases of community consultation where we'll be seeking input from the community. We are, I guess, in the process of launching these centres, and the pilot plan will be released in the near future. Then around primarily in May, we'll be engaging with the community and holding community reference groups to get, I guess, the community's view about what is important about these places that we need to consider in the plan. And then later on in the year, around September, October, we'll come back to the community with some of our initial thinking and draft components from the activity centre plans to get your feedback and feedback from communities across Melbourne. So it's a quick overview of the activity centres program. There will be questions, opportunities for questions at the end, and there's also an email address here for you can send through your inquiries. I've also been, I guess, asked to be the speaker for the next item, which is around what's loosely referred to in our industry as res code, but is certain clauses within the planning schemes. And part of the government's planning reforms include the implementation of what are referred to as deemed to comply standards. So the res code or these clauses relate to development, single dwellings and multiple dwellings up to 3 stories. So these codes cover that range of development, and the deemed to comply standards are being introduced to help streamline approvals and help deliver the housing that the growing population needs. So a quick overview. This is probably a little bit more technical than some of the earlier stuff. And if you have any particular questions, you can ask at the end. But a quick overview of how these standards work there's an objective that the standard is seeking to achieve. There is a standard. It might be a height or a certain setback that a development needs to achieve. If we go back to here, for example, there might be a setback from a boundary or from a front or a landscape requirement. And if you meet that standard now under the new reforms, it will be, I guess, supported. There's no subjectivity once it meets that standard. It would be a quantifiable standard. And then I guess the negotiation is more on standards that are not met or so I guess the local authority, the planning authority in many cases will be the local council. So Bayside, if something meets that standard, will not be able to refuse an application on that standard. And there may be other reasons that they don't support an application, but where there is a deemed to comply standard, they won't be able to refuse it if that standard is met. How that interacts with other overlays in the planning scheme, the heritage overlay will still continue to apply. And if, I guess, there'd still need to be an application for a demolition, and that's assessed separately from the deemed to comply standard, so they don't override that. There will, you wouldn't be able to, I guess, appeal or refuse on a standard that's specific to the code. So there'll be no change to the notice part of the planning application process. So applications that are required for notice now will continue to be. However, an end of the submissions will need to be considered by the council, the responsible authority. However, if that decision is made and a permit is issued, there won't be the opportunity for third-party appeal against standards that are deemed to comply if they comply with that standard. So if an application is approved and it complies with 9 deemed to comply standards but doesn't comply with one, then potentially there could be a third-party appeal against that one that doesn't comply, but it wouldn't be able to appeal against those that do comply. And that the intent there is to give clearer guidance to community and developers about what can and can't be done to enable the streamlining of approvals that aren't compliant, so they can be delivered with, I guess, greater confidence and more quickly to deliver the housing that people are seeking. So that's an overview of my section. I'll hand over to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thanks very much, David. Lots of information captured there. Appreciate your time in letting us know more about the Activity Centre program and the Res Code as well. Thank you. I'd now like to introduce Lisa Ryan, Head of Precinct Planning at the Suburban Rail Loop Authority. Thanks, Lisa.
Hi everyone and good evening. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I'm going to give a brief overview this evening of the structure plan and some of the content in the structure plan, and then also my colleagues here, and we'll talk through some of the planning scheme components. So just to give you a bit of an overview of what the presentation's covering, structure plan, PSA, and then we'll have more questions later. So we're happy to go through things in further detail. A quick snapshot of where we've been over the past couple of years with engagement. This is our engagement timeline, and this just gives you a quick snapshot of where we are in the process. So we're now in the darker blue colour, and we're exhibiting the plans. So we're exhibiting the structure plans, the implementation plans, the background reports, and also the technical studies. So we're open for exhibition from the 22nd of March, 2nd of March through till the 22nd of April. We have been receiving submissions from the community and our stakeholders, and we're keen to continue to receive submissions, so please send them through. The next phase is really where we kick into the statutory process, where the Minister for Planning appoints an independent advisory committee to consider the submissions and the plans, including the planning scheme amendment. Then we move through to our final phase, which is phase 5, where we're hopefully looking for finalisation of the PSA, adoption of the structure plans somewhere around mid-2026. This slide just gives you a little bit of a snapshot of the engagement to date. I won't go through all of the stats that we've got up there, but just gives you, and that's all of our key stages, the draft visions, the discussion paper, the final visions, the key directions and the structure plan. We've received overwhelming response along the way, over 9,000 responses, which has been terrific. And we've held an enormous amount of workshops with councils and other stakeholders over the past few years. This is our current engagement, and I just want to draw your attention to a couple of things at the bottom of the table. One is our online webinar for Cheltenham tomorrow evening. We've been doing webinars across the precincts, and they've been really well attended. And we've also put on an additional information session on Monday the 7th of April from the 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. at the Hyatt Neighbourhood Community House. And we have a lot of our technical specialists coming along to those sessions in relation to transport, urban design, community infrastructure, open space. So if you have detailed questions or you've been looking at the technical reports, that's a really good session to come along to and ask questions. And you can actually register for different time slots with the various staff at that session. I'll now take you through some of the key highlights of the draft Cheltenham Structure Plan. So this plan here is really setting the context. So just to give you a bit of an update, the area shaded grey in the purple line is the structure plan area. So that's what the structure plan relates to, and also the draft planning scheme amendment. And what the structure plan does is it looks at change in relation to, say, land use, built form, transport, open space, community infrastructure. This slide gives you a bit of a snapshot of the population growth. So there is an increase in population from 2021 to 2041, nearly doubling in size of population. And to achieve that population, it might be hard to read from where you are, an additional 4,500 dwellings are required. Further to that, this slide's showing a bit of an update on the job and employment growth. So you can see on the right, again, a doubling of employment numbers across the structure plan area for Cheltenham. Looking at from 2021 to 2041, the time horizon for the structure planning is planning for 2041. To tailor the structure plan, we did group areas with unique characteristics and attributes. So you can see on this slide there's 5, we call them neighbourhoods in the structure plan, and that's really where there's synergies with like characteristics. And it's a way of flipping through the documentation and it being a bit more user-friendly. And for people who have looked at the structure plan, when you're looking at chapter 6, you can actually go via each neighbourhood. So that helps with ease of reference with the documentation. All of our structure plans have a land use plan, and the land use plan is about how promoting change to accommodate the population and employment growth. I won't go through all of the things on this slide. This is in the structure plan documentation, also on our website, and is available at the sessions on Monday in large-scale form to discuss. But you can essentially see the commercial area. So the commercial area is centred around the new SRLA station, so a hub of activity, and that's also relates to the higher density housing. We have identified mixed-use areas, and you can see the important role that Bayside Business District will continue to play in relation to employment. This slide's representing the significant change for housing growth, And I'd say in relation to the significant change, which is the dark pink on the screen, that's really concentrated again around the SRLA station, Southland Shopping Centre, and the former gasworks site. And as you transition out from those areas, the growth and scale of change starts to decrease. This slide is about built form, and it really starts to set the level of change in relation to preferred maximum building heights. So it's important to reiterate that these are preferred maximum building heights, and Alistair will talk a little bit more to the planning controls, but building heights are discretionary, they're not mandatory. The level of change on this plan, the dark purple, is showing the highest level of change in relation to the intensity around the new SRLA station, so capitalising off the new station, Southland Shopping Centre, and also the former gasworks site. And you can see as we transition away from those central core areas, the heights and scale of development does start to change. We did receive a lot of response from the key directions phase in relation to the scale intensity of some of the heights within the Cheltenham structure plan, and we have looked to adjust and recalibrate where possible, including some adjustments in the Pennydale area and also the former CSIRO site. This slide is about livable and sustainable communities, and what it seeks to do is to identify potential investigation areas for new open space. They're the dark green dots. It also looks to identify in the pink shading areas where there might be potential gaps to open space based on the 400 metre metric that's been applied. So this plan, as are the other plans that we've talked through tonight, are underpinned by a number of technical studies. So in the documentation that we have published, there's an open space technical study, there's also a community infrastructure technical study, and probably I'd like to just reiterate, there's a number of detailed technical studies. There's also for each precinct, so for Cheltenham, a background report, and the background report summarises the technical studies and pulls out the key findings. So you don't necessarily need to go through all the detailed technical studies. The background report is a really good tool to look at to get a quick snapshot of the issue and the state of play and what the recommendations are. I'm going to pass over to Alistair to give an overview on the PSA.
G'day everyone, my name's Alistair and I'm here to talk about the PSA, and I guess building off what Lisa has outlined with the structure plans and the implementation plans particularly. So the implementation plans set out where there's a recommendation to amend the planning scheme, and I guess I'll summarise that as it relates to Cheltenham here. So the first thing I guess that we're doing is amending and updating policies in the planning schemes, and that's really to help guide planning application decisions, and it works alongside the zone and overlay controls to help provide direction and also discretion for decision making. At the moment, there's very little reference to SRL in the local planning policies, so we are making amendments through parts of the planning schemes to make sure that is appropriately reflected. And also, I guess that's part of the I guess implementing state policy, and particularly the Victorian housing statement and some of the Plan for Victoria items that Lester mentioned earlier. Moving on from policy changes, I guess the key change inside the Cheltenham structure plan area is that we are proposing to include a precinct zone. That's a new zone that's been introduced by the Minister for Planning into the Victorian planning system recently, and it's really tailor-made for those areas that are locations where substantial or transformative change is intended, and it puts all the relevant land use direction for a precinct in one place, so it simplifies things, and it also has the ability to guide built form as well, but I'll get onto built form changes in the planning scheme shortly. In some areas of the structure plan area, we are proposing a voluntary public benefit uplift framework. So that allows for some additional floor area in areas of higher change in return for securing public benefits. So that could include affordable housing, that could include public realm improvements, or in some cases strategic land uses that are intended in certain neighbourhoods of the structure plan areas. As well, the precinct zone also identifies three, at Cheltenham anyway, strategic sites that will be subject to master plan requirements, and all of those are actually located in the City of Kingston side of the Cheltenham structure plan area, but obviously there's an interface with Bayside. So that's at the SRL Cheltenham station, there's one there, the Southland Shopping Centre, and also the former Hyatt Gasworks. If I move on to overlays, and I've sort of hinted at this earlier, so we, in terms of built form management, so that's height controls, setbacks, and things like that, that is proposed to be covered by the built form overlay, and that's again, it's a new tool in the Victorian planning system that's been introduced, and that sets out the detailed guidance in a sort of a systematic way, I guess, for how built form matters are to be dealt with. So that's a new tool that's come in, we think, that will help guide direction of the structure plan area and also the decision making that takes place. The environmental audit overlay, that covers, that identifies potentially contaminated land, and there are some land uses where there's a legacy of potential legacy of contamination, and we're proposing to apply that audit overlay where sensitive land use is proposed to be allowed for the first time. So there's places where land use change is happening, and as well as that, there's a potential contamination history to the site. That's where we'd be applying the overlay. And the third one, in terms of key overlay changes, is the parking overlay, and this is a reasonably well-established tool in the planning system, and what we're proposing here is that lower rates of parking would be proposed in the central areas of our structure plan areas, so at Cheltenham, for instance, and there would be different parking rates towards the edges, and we do propose setting a maximum rate where no permit is required. If someone wants to go beyond that rate, they will need a planning permit. So it's not stopping provision of parking beyond the rate, but it is meaning that there's a gateway, there's a permit control that a permit applicant would need to go through. Finally, the precinct zone and the built form overlay, their default setting is that notice and review rights are switched off, and in these areas of substantial and transformative change, certainly for the zone, we are proposing to maintain that, recognising that along our line wide, along our corridor, these are areas with a large, there's a policy direction and there's a policy direction that there'll be substantial change. So we are proposing to maintain what's already in the default statewide control for the zone and the overlay. And I think that's probably it. I think we'll probably move on to the questions here. I think, Lisa's talked to some of these, the further information sessions, so the webinar tomorrow night and also the information session on Monday. And submissions are open until the end of Tuesday, the 22nd of April, and SRLA will consider all submissions, and as Lisa has talked to, there'll be an independent advisory committee set up to consider the key matters along the whole SRL corridor. And we do have a QR code for people to engage on our website and beyond as well. I think that's it.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you to all our speakers so far. We'll leave the panellists' names and roles up on the screen so you can ask direct questions of any of the speakers as we go. Same for those online as well. So we'll start. I've got a range of questions coming through as we speak, but I will start with a broad question to our panel, and we'll go through one at a time with a response to our opening question. So the projects that we're here to talk about tonight are once-in-a-generation city-shaping projects. To start us off, can you tell us what you think the biggest opportunities for Bayside will be? Should be 2 mics there that you can share as well. We might start with you, Lester, if that's okay. Yeah.
Oh, well, I think it's the biggest opportunities are to, in one sense, to be involved in that generational change. Is that, as I say, I think there is a cultural shift. There is a certainly from the minister down a desire to listen to the community, to be part of that. Yes, it's a plan for all of Victoria, so that doesn't mean that everything. It might be what you expected for your individual community, but there is that broad commitment to work and to build the future, to create a future that's better for all Victorians. I think that's the opportunity to help create that positive future.
The opportunity for Bayside as part of the Activity Centres program. I guess the program and Plan for Vic is really driven by the housing challenges that are being experienced in the community, and a commitment to ensuring the planning side at least is enabling additional housing delivery. So I guess the opportunity is for greater housing choice, particularly for people that are struggling to afford housing at the moment, and particularly for future generations, because there will be many. These are long-term plans, so it's about making sure that generations in future can afford to own and access affordable housing. And I guess particularly for the plans that we're starting on, there's the opportunity to shape how that growth occurs and what infrastructure and improvements can be delivered as part of those plans.
No.
Better? Yeah, so for Suburban Rail Loop, we're really, really excited about the new station and the opportunities that can bring, particularly, for example, students living and working in Cheltenham will be able to catch the new rail to New Station at Monash University, New Station at Deakin University, opportunities to access Box Hill Institute of TAFE Hospital Precinct. So it just completely transforms how people can move around the city and Greater Victoria, also including the regional areas. And more specifically, we're really excited to identify early and to capture the land use and the precinct planning opportunities in relation to this, fantastic investment in infrastructure.
Thank you. If you need any assistance with asking questions, I've got the council team as well to support. Thank you very much. We've got lots of questions coming through for David around the Activity Centre program. One of the questions is around whether the community should be expecting high-rise apartments in Bayside.
Sorry?
Whether the community should be expecting high-rise apartments in Bayside.
Yes, I mean, there will be greater densities and apartment buildings. That's a core component of the plan. I guess it depends on what you define as high-rise, but the Moorabbin plan allows for up to 12 stories, primarily 6 to 8, but some of the larger sites around the station and right in the heart of the centre will allow for up to 12-storey, and the majority of that development would be apartment towers, albeit potentially with shops and offices at the lower levels.
Thanks, David. A question for the Suburban Rail Loop team. Can I expect the delivery of new sports fields, tennis courts and other recreational infrastructure to be delivered inside the Cheltenham SRL precinct area in response to all the population and housing growth? Is there an identified need for more?
Yeah, so we have, one thing that I didn't mention in the presentation is we have an implementation plan. So the implementation plan sets out and their draft potential key projects for the Cheltenham structure plan area, and it includes transport infrastructure, open space and community infrastructure. We are asking council and stakeholders to provide us feedback on those draft key projects. Those key projects include open space opportunities as well as community infrastructure. And how we've come up with those key projects is both talking to our stakeholders and also our technical assessments. So our technical assessments, for example, in relation to open space and community infrastructure, has assessed the gap or the need, and then we've looked to accommodate that in the structure plan via the implementation plan. So the implementation plan is a separate standalone document to the structure plan. So we are asking that people, if they're putting in submissions, do have a look at that key project list in the implementation plan. We have set out in those lists, and it's via neighbourhood, via those 5 neighbourhoods that I spoke about earlier in the presentation. We've set out timeframes and we've set out lead agencies as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Lisa. This is a question for everybody, so anyone on the panel to answer. There's quite a few questions coming through about active transport, and the question specifically is about what will be done to promote walking and cycling as the preferred modes to and within these activity centre areas.
There is an action within a plan for Victoria more generally to encourage walking and cycling, and we expect that there will be specific initiatives announced by the government within the next few months. But people will be broadly familiar with the opportunities to improve. So for cycling, the more protected cycle lanes you have, the more people are comfortable for cycling. For walking, the more pleasant the walking environment is, the presence of shortcuts or convenient walkways assists that. But I'll leave it to SRL for specifics.
I'll just make a couple of brief comments. So we've taken active walking and cycling really seriously in the structure plan. So we have identified strategies and actions within the structure plan. And then in terms of key projects, deliverables on the ground, again, we've highlighted them in the draft implementation plan in the key projects. If people are looking for further detail, we do have a comprehensive transport report, which has been done by a consultant and then also peer reviewed, which does set the evidence base and the justification for what we're highlighted in the structure plan and the draft implementation plan.
Thanks. I'd just like to add, I guess, on the SRL flank, but also probably on the activity centre side is the mix of land uses as well. It's important in terms of encouraging walking and cycling that there is a good mix of land uses, because people, like the evidence shows, that if there's a good mix of origins, like where people are starting from, and destinations that are in close proximity, it makes it easier for people to do that. No one's expecting people to ride 10 Ks from somewhere to go, wherever necessarily. But if it is something where it's a walk of a few hundred metres or it's a bike ride of say less than 2 kilometres, that's a far more attractive proposition. And that's not for every trip, and not everyone's going to ride every time, of course, but it is about making sure that the ability is there to do that. And there's the projects that Lisa talked about, but there's also the mix of land uses. That's the other side of the coin.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all speakers so far. Another question coming back to you, Lester, is around parking. So in Plan Victoria, one action is to match car parking with demand, but new planning guidelines seek to set a maximum number of car parking spaces in your apartments and not a minimum. How will this work?
So the first part of I'll come back to the second part. I might need that repeated. Yes, there's an action in a plan for Victoria. So we know that not everybody has a car. We know that, and we know there is a demand for apartments without car spaces. And we know that in some areas, 40% of car spaces in apartment buildings are vacant. So the thinking is that if of course there'll still be a need for some car parking, but the current thinking is to, in the first instance, provide less, and that will be changes to the requirements that are currently in planning schemes. So we are asking people to provide car parking spaces that are essentially not needed in those areas that have very good access to public transport. So that we will be using a measure of the accessibility using public transport, and it will be in those areas that have that high public transport access that there will be a decrease in the basic requirement for what you might need to provide. Certainly that may be coupled in certain precincts with more specific controls in setting maximums. But there is also, as part of that story, a move to shared parking or a flexibility so that you don't tie just the car parking one-on-one or two-on-one to apartments, but those people who need a car for a period of time or can rent a space. That's the most efficient way to provide car parking to reduce costs to homes and to encourage some of that shift to active transport. Was the second part about setting maximums?
It's about if the maximum number of car parks don't meet the demand in that apartment building or in area. So if the maximum doesn't meet the need.
Oh, so there's more people want to park than there is. Yep. One would expect that when people purchase the apartment that they will realise that their access to car parking and they'll make that choice. But we know from experience in those areas, in some areas where abundant car parking has not been provided, not just in apartments, but things such as that I'm familiar with in Kensington Banks, the old sale yards area going back a few years, areas near me are Brickworks redevelopment. Sometimes people, yes, will move into areas and with an expectation to park 3 cars. The experience shows that those people will move out quicker than the people who are there who don't need a car parking space. And I don't want to sound glib about that. I accept that there can be sort of teething issues as people don't fully understand the implications, but we see over time some areas that had those difficulties are now reached an equilibrium where people realise what they can and can't do. And certainly I know people, got friends, I mean I live in a very transport-rich area, who have sold their cars because they're just not, they're not useful to them. So we know that over the long term there is a lesser demand for parking. I'm not going to say there won't necessarily be teething troubles, or some people purchase a property and then get upset they can't find a car parking space, but we expect that those sorts of things will wash out in a relative short time.
From the SRL perspective, we do have, as I mentioned earlier, we do have maximum parking rates in our parking overlays, but that's not, there is a permit trigger that people can apply for, and we recognise that, Cheltenham is not Collingwood, Cheltenham is not Carnegie. It is a place where, the lifespan of this structure plan is over 20 years, and things will change gradually. And when developers apply for permits, they are open to make that sort of market decision in terms of what they know Cheltenham now or Cheltenham in the near future might be able to, might be able to bear, if that makes sense, in terms of car parking. So although there is a maximum rate applied, that's just a maximum where you don't need a permit. Once you go over that, there are guidelines about how that's judged, but I guess we're recognising that it is a longer term thing, and it is something that will take shape in different ways along the SRL corridor.
Thank you. We have quite a few questions coming through around diversity of housing, and particularly for ageing population. So this is a question for anyone to answer. With the ageing population, we'll be seeing a significant increase in the over 70s population. Ageing in our current home may not be possible for most, so we will need a more suitable home in our current community to enable this to happen. multi-storey is not suitable for everybody. What plans are there to facilitate diversity of housing for older people?
Yeah, I'll field that question, although it is, I guess, applicable for each. I guess the Activity Centre program is looking at a range of housing types, including the significant catchment areas would primarily facilitate that kind of 2, 3, 4-storey. And that's probably the area of most significant change in how we're planning Melbourne. The centres themselves have been, the planning for those centres has often allowed greater heights for a fair while now. The catchment areas within walking distance to the centres and the stations is probably the area of change. And it's providing more of that medium to low scale multi-unit dwelling. So there will be, a fair number of those units at ground level, as well as ones not too much above ground level. And that's probably what the future households are looking for. There's only so much single dwellings in the city. It's highly competitive. And then in the past, maybe there's been a focus on high-rise or single dwellings and not much in between. I guess the Activity Centre program and Plan for Vic are trying to provide that middle scale housing that matches a bit more what young families need. They don't want to necessarily live in a high-rise apartment, a small high-rise apartment, no balcony. They're looking for a terrace house, an attached or a medium scale density, and those are also the types that would be more suitable for downsizers. Certainly my parents up in Brisbane moved into a more accessible location where they can walk around and didn't have to drive, and it was in that typology that worked for them. And my dad was in a wheelchair for many years, and that worked for him. So it helps people age in place and stay close to their existing social connections, as well as helps the next member of the family to continue to live in an area like Bayside, where if the additional housing wasn't available, that might not be an economic option for them.
Just, I guess, echoing that from the SRL perspective, but also just, I think there was a question about multi-storey apartments may not be suitable for everyone. So depending on the part of the structure plan area, depending on the part of the neighbourhood, we are encouraging townhouse development as well. So it's not necessarily multi-storey sort of thing where there's a smaller building for a smaller lot frontage, I should say, property frontage, like less than 24 metres wide. We're really encouraging that sort of townhouse type development, and I guess continuing to provide that choice as David mentioned.
Thank you. And this question kind of builds on from there, which some of your responses probably touched on this already, but I'll ask the question anyway in case there's anything further to add. I'm concerned that taller buildings just means more but not higher quality. Has the government considered the needs of future residents and who will be likely to be living in these buildings?
So there's certainly apartment quality and build quality. It came through strongly through our engagement program for a plan for Victoria. So we understand that, and the government understands that. So there is a work both in the planning space and the building space to do that. There's a commitment in a plan for Victoria to update the Better Apartment Design Guidelines. That's work my colleagues are progressing to ensure that we do have well laid out apartments. And people, if people are familiar with the journey that we've been on with apartments in Victoria, there's certain things like snorkel bedroom windows and that which you now can no longer do. All apartments need to have cross ventilation. So these things are already part of design standards for buildings, and they will be further enhanced over the next year or so. The other arm to that is building quality and building defects. I'm not an expert in that field, but I know that my colleagues in the department have been working very hard to address those issues, and I can't recall the details off the top of my head, but there are reform processes in the building authority space to ensure that the build quality and the overseeing of that build quality is what we would expect.
And I guess, yeah, from SRL, again, we're sort of building off those statewide requirements, the BADS requirements and other things in terms of amenity. We're also, in many cases, in our residential neighbourhoods and our urban neighbourhoods, we're providing more generous side setbacks and codifying rear setbacks in a different way to the statewide sort of requirements. So it provides more space between those buildings where they're developed a bit higher, and also provides opportunity for deep soil planting and making sure that there's that that the space for future urban canopy, urban forest canopy.
Thank you. There's a number of questions coming through. Obviously, there's been a lot of information within the community and also through media and different channels about the activity centre and the different kind of planning schemes. So there's a question around that something has been heard, whether this is true or not. So this is back to you, Lester. Although various height limits are mandated in the planning scheme, the Planning Minister subsequently stated that they can override those set heights if a developer offers a better building. Is this true?
So the question is, can mandatory standards be overridden if the developer offers a better building? Not through the conventional process for that mandatory setting. So if there are overlays or controls that set a mandatory control.
Okay, out of respect for people online in the room, we're going to try and get as much information as we can. We're going to ask you to either sit down or please exit. We're just trying to get through as much information as we can for those online and those in the room. So I know there's a lot of strong feelings and this is about collecting more information. So thank you. We'll ask you to please be respectful of our speakers tonight. Thanks, everyone. Okay, can we please be respectful tonight? We've asked you to use the Mentimeter because it's a big audience, so we're asking you to please put your questions through that channel. We're getting through as many as we can tonight, but we're really asking for respect for our speakers. Thank you. We don't want to have to finish up tonight on this note. We want to try and get through as much information as we can, so we can please remain respectful in our communication. Thank you.
I'm happy to just address that very briefly. In a Plan for Victoria consultation, we reached 110,000 people across Victoria. We had submission pieces, we had 15,000 submissions that we considered. We had a community panel that wrote our vision. We went from the proposition that if Victoria needs to find room, that's the right term, we need to create the capacity to build 2.24 million homes by 2050. Why do we do that? Because the population is growing. It is growing because people are living longer. It is growing because people are having children. It is growing because people are moving, not leaving Victoria or moving to Victoria. It is growing because of immigration, none of which is controlled by the state government. So the choice is, do we look at what we think our housing needs might be for a state in 2050 and take that figure and work out where is the best place, considering all the communities across Victoria, to identify that. And so that's a starting proposition in terms of what we do. But it's based, I think, also your question, sir, is based on the proposition that somehow, and maybe it's the this experience that you've seen in Bayside. They're walking here from the station. I see that there has been densification in this area, and that densification, maybe I'm looking at different to you, sir, but it looks pretty good to me. And
again, we're going to have to finish up a little bit earlier if people are yelling out through the audience, because we've got a whole list of questions here that people have submitted both online in the room. So if we can please use that mechanism so we can get through as many as we can, rather than yelling out to the audience. It's a bit difficult to hear anyway, but also just so we can get through what's already been submitted. Is there any further comment on what's it? No. Okay. We might just keep moving through. We'll see how many we can get through tonight. There are a number of questions around access to housing for different population groups, in particular a question for Lisa and Alistair. If homes closer to railway stations are more expensive, how will this housing policy enable young and low income people to afford housing?
I'm happy to kick this one off. So we have done quite a comprehensive housing needs assessment, and we have in our structure plan also incorporated social affordable housing. So in the structure plan for social affordable housing, we're aligned with the government targets, and we've also identified the opportunity for additional social affordable housing on the strategic sites. So we are looking at providing a variety and diversity of the housing types and options within the structure plan. And Alistair might talk to it a little bit further how we're proposing to implement the social affordable housing.
Yeah, in terms of the affordable housing, that is one of the categories for the voluntary uplift framework, and we are incentivising or trying to encourage affordable housing in along our SRL corridor, and really that sort of recognises that we've got a large investment in the transport infrastructure, and there'll be a lot better access and movement for these areas in the future. So they are good places to have affordable housing options for different people.
Yeah, we've instructed if you need support with that, or you want to write down a question to be submitted, and that can be, you can raise your hand and someone from council can support you to do that. But with an audience this large, it's really difficult to hand a microphone around to everybody without it becoming... Excuse me, I'm sorry, but as I said before, my job here is for this to be a respectful night and for there to be as much information shared as possible. So I'll ask you to be respectful, please. Yes, but within tonight's... Okay, within the plan for tonight, we've got a number of people online who are joining online, who are watching, who are submitting questions, who are wanting information. We've got people in the room who are wanting their questions answered. So we're just going to try and get through as much as we can. And as I said earlier, my job here is to make sure everyone's comfortable, our speakers are comfortable. So if we can just stick to the plan, we can get through as much as we can. Otherwise, I'll have to finish up a little bit earlier if we continue on this journey. Someone's got their hand up. You've got... Okay. I'll look to council for a decision here about whether you're going to continue, council and speakers. We're happy to... Okay, we're going to get through some additional questions. With the increased density around Moorabbin Activity Centre, and now also at the other activity centres as part of this program, what improvements are planned to the Moorabbin Railway Station to accommodate the population increase? Is the state government considering any upgrades to train stations along the Sandringham line?
I think I'll have to take that one on notice. Some of the questions I think we'll collect and prepare responses for. I'm not familiar with that particular whether there's station upgrades proposed in Moorabbin or not.
All right, thank you. Okay. We have a number of questions here that are coming through online about the 6-storey builds. So how can 6-storey apartments feasibly be built and occupied in neighbourhoods with long, narrow, dead-end streets? The particular concern is about trucks and whether they'll be able to exit from streets in Pennydale.
I guess, yeah, one of the challenges is with accommodating the population growth and the development that's planned for is the lot sizes. In different parts of Melbourne, there's all types of different lot sizes. Some of them are quite small and not suitable or not feasible to do high density development on. That's really up to property owner and developers, etc. Across the plan, and there's modelling that looks at what lots can accommodate more in the catchment area. We allow for greater heights on sites over 1,000. They're sites that are probably more suitable for larger scale development. Depending on the area, I'm not 100% sure on Moorabbin, but across the pilot activity centres, that's probably only about 4% of sites. So where there are sites that are suitable for multi-unit development, then that's an opportunity in the plan for those landowners and the developers to partner to create more homes in those neighbourhoods. If the site's not suitable, then it might not redevelop. In regards to trucks and cul-de-sacs, I don't think I can comment on that particular matter.
I think from our perspective with the trucks and along the streets and stuff, it's a 20-year sort of lifespan for the plan, and we don't imagine that the redevelopment or changes would happen all at once or anything like that. That would be something that would be subject to individual landowners and all of that sort of thing. So in terms of what that would look like, we're not imagining that would be a straight away you click your fingers and it's a different sort of thing, and there's all the construction impacts associated with that in that one go.
Thanks so much. I'm just getting some further guidance around the questions coming through. There are over 200 questions that have come through the Menti at the moment, so there's a lot that the Bayside team are filtering through to be able to condense as many as we can into one night. On the comments earlier, obviously tonight's session is a Q&A, so it's the format of question answer. There's further consultation and engagement that will be happening in your communities in April and May, where it's more of the consultation, conversation style of engagement. Tonight's really that Q&A function, so you can gather as much information as you can, and then there'll be further consultation face-to-face and online where you can give your feedback to the government as we go forward, so in April and May. So we'll have contacts at the end of this presentation around that, about how to stay involved, how to be updated. But tonight, as I mentioned earlier, really it's a Q&A, it's a question and answer to gather information for yourselves. So as I said, there's 200 questions coming through. We have had a request for more plain English. So there's some people online that have asked for some more plain English responses to assist with their understanding. One of the questions that has come through, there's quite a few around the same theme. There's some questions around confirming the number again of people that were consulted through this process. Was it to inform the Plan Victoria, was that 142,000 people? And if so, the comment is around it being around 3% of the population, is that correct?
So our consultation reached 110,000 people. We had 15,000 specific items of feedback. That consultation program went out and reached out to a great variety of communities. So it wasn't just people who, like yourselves, who are interested. We reached out to a number of communities.
And I'd probably just add for Suburban Rail Loop, for our key phases of consultation, we've also published online our consultation report that summarises the key phases of consultation from the discussion paper, draft visions, final visions, key directions to where we are today. So that's worth having a look at. And we'll have hard copies of the document available at the information session on Monday from 4 till 7.
Thanks very much. Another question for everybody. Who pays for the new kindergartens, parks, maternal and child health centres and libraries that will be needed for the larger population in Hampton? From Robin.
I guess that's partly about the infrastructure question and the infrastructure charging question, which the government is actively engaging with industry around a simplified, standardised charging for any new unit and non-residential development as well. Where there is a new development, that the developer is required to pay an infrastructure charge, and it's standard across all of them, and that money is distributed between the council and the state government to help fund the various infrastructure that council and state are responsible for. Through our planning and through SRL, we will do analysis around what's needed in those areas. We'll also engage with councils and community to understand what they see as important in those areas, and then we'll need to look at what charging can be collected and any other avenues for delivery, and then do a prioritisation about what can be afforded, what can't, and consult with council on that.
Thank you. Thanks, David. If I can just ask the audience to keep the chatter down a little bit. People online are struggling to hear as well, so they can hear background chatter. So I can just ask people to, if you want your conversation, maybe to step into the foyer area. That would be helpful. Thank you. The next question is for Lester, but for everybody as well. I'm concerned that these state government reforms will result in us going back to the days of 1970s walk-up flats. How will state government ensure high quality development will be provided?
There are a raft of planning controls and building controls that would not allow you to do the sort of the 70s flats. Partly the 70s flats, some of it is the aesthetics, of course, though some of them have been heritage listed recently. But to say we have planning controls that set a range in terms of open space, landscaping, etc., that would mean that those examples would just simply not be possible. And certainly we heard very clearly through consultation that people want housing diversity, but they want good quality homes, even those albeit some of those homes are will be apartments or townhouses, but certainly there is no appetite or desire or thought that we would be reproducing the worst of the 70s walk-ups.
Thank you. And obviously we're getting through as many as we can, but we won't get through all 200 questions. But Council and our team here will respond to as many as we can through the Engage website platform, or also through Council website to be able to talk to some of the key themes that are coming through, the questions that we don't get to, just so we can get through as many as we can, and then the rest will be handed over to the team to respond to at a later date. So keeping in theme with some of the questions around high-rise buildings and around building developments, there are a number of questions about the planning scheme amendments, both for the Activity Centre program and the SRL. Will there be a planning scheme amendment exhibited for the changes and the opportunity to make a submission and then a panel hearing?
I'll speak from the SRL perspective. So the submissions are open now, and as Lisa has highlighted, and we've got in the presentation here, that closes on the 22nd of April. So get your submissions in with respect to Cheltenham, and we anticipate that an advisory committee will be set up by the Minister for Planning, and they will consider the key issues towards the later end of this year.
In regard to the Activity Centre program, there was a standing advisory committee for the first 10 centres last year that I guess reviewed the draft work, and then that work, those plans are to be released in the near future. There wasn't a statutory public exhibition process for those. There was community consultation, I guess proactive non-statutory community consultation, but there was an accelerated scheme amendment process for the pilot. For the next 50, where I guess we need to explore what can be delivered, how those plans can be delivered promptly to enable the housing the government's asking us to deliver, and I guess we still need to work through exactly what process will follow for those.
Thanks, David. Question for Lisa and Alistair. It's a bit of a longer question, so I'll read it out in full. What is the plan for connecting Southland and Hyatt stations to the SRL station? For Southland especially, accessing William Fry Reserve requires crossing multiple roads, one of which is Bay Road. If this existing road level pedestrian crossing were to be relied upon, it would cause further delays and congestion on the already often bottlenecked Bay Road.
I might pass over to Brenton, who's from our team. We are providing infrastructure to make that connection, but I think that's more from the rail side of the project, I think, so I can...
Yep. You want to grab the mic?
Yeah, so as part of our rail project, we will be building infrastructure over Bay Road. So we do have plans for a pedestrian and cycling overpass. It basically starts at the forecourt of Southland Station and it heads up over Bay Road alongside of the rail. And the intention of that is to connect up the shopping centre, the train station and the new SRL East station. It'll also provide a pretty critical part of the strategic north-south cycling link that will one day sort of connect up Hyde all the way down to Cheltenham. So it's a key part of that as well. Sorry? Yeah, so there's a link through Jean Street and yeah, there's obviously further work to be done to connect it up, but that is the ultimate plan, to link up the whole length up and down over time.
Thank you. Yep, sorry, just some extra response to be added.
So just to further add to that, just to add the broader context of the changes that we're making in the area related to the rail station, we do have plans to improve the footpaths on either side of Bay Road underneath the rail bridge, and we've also got plans to add a cycling path under there as well, because obviously we acknowledge that the current arrangement is not acceptable, especially for people from Hyatt and Pennydale and the like who will be trying to access the station. Now, we have heard loud and clear from community through our various consultations that there is concern about traffic congestion along Bay Road due to those changes. We're obviously trying to strike a delicate balance because we're trying to make it safe and accessible for people, for example, with prams, as you just mentioned, because at the moment it is very narrow and it's really difficult to get through there. It's not very safe. However, we have heard that feedback loud and clear about the traffic congestion. We're looking at options now about some other things that we may be able to deliver to satisfy the different needs. One thing that is very important is when it comes to the rail station, it's not planned to be open and operational until the year 2035. So those changes to Bay Road aren't actually planned to be delivered until around about that time. And that includes the pedestrian bridge as well. So when you think about it, we've got quite a bit of time to continue to work through those issues. But just so you're clear, we hear loud and clear from community that there are concerns about the traffic, and yeah, we are considering that now. And we've heard that from Bayside Council loud and clear as well. So yeah, we're certainly considering it.
Sorry, can we get someone from council to support with questions, because otherwise we challenge to get through everything. Yeah, thank you. So a question for everybody, another one that's a number of people have submitted a similar question. How can the character of the area be kept in the face of so much change?
How can the character of the area be kept through so much change? I suppose it goes to what you think makes up the character of the area. In terms of, is it the community? Is it your connections? Is it the people you know in the area? Is it the way people in Bayside go about their lives? Is that part of the character? Or is it very particular about built form? And if it is particular about built form, what is that in terms of how we think of that in character, when we could think of character in that broader issue about how communities come together, how communities are inclusive, as well as the character. Now, certainly my colleagues will talk about the specifics of the built form issues and the balancing about how you can do change in an area and keep some of that fundamentals of the character. But I just ask you also to reflect on what does it mean in terms of character and change, particularly from my perspective for a long-term plan for Victoria. We're thinking 30 years in advance. If we think 30 years back, what sort of character did we have then? Do we think we're better off in so many parts of Victoria or not? What do we want to carry forward? And how do we want to make sure that future generations have access to the quality of life that we have access to?
Thanks, Lester. I guess in regard to the Activity Centre program, and probably what is generally referred to around character is built form. As mentioned earlier, the heritage overlay controls will be retained. And I guess as investment often occurs in activity centres, there is an improvement in streetscape character often, because there's a lot more people on the street. Governments and both local and state invest in more pedestrian-friendly street environments, tree planting, all that kind of thing, which you can see in centres across Melbourne. So there is improvements in some areas. We look to retain the history and the heritage as protected by the heritage overlay, but the reality is, I guess, if Australia's continuing to grow the population that it is, as Lester said, those are decisions beyond our levels of government, then we need to provide or plan for how we can provide housing for those people, and that there will be change in these areas. These areas have been selected because they are suitable for change and additional housing. So where our, I guess, job is to make sure that change is planned well, and that buildings are designed well. We protect the heritage and the public spaces and the trees, that we enable that change and that additional housing to be provided in a sensible way.
Just before the next response, just a reminder about the conversations in the audience. If we can please get those to a minimum. We've got 10 minutes left around that to get through as many more questions as we can, but there's some struggles with hearing online. I can hear background noise, so if we can please try and reduce that chatter as much as possible, please.
Yeah, from the SRL perspective, I mean, we're, I guess, aligned with the Activity Centres program. We're not proposing any changes to heritage controls, existing heritage controls that exist. And also very mindful just with our the built form overlay, just how that manages things like setback and height, and also the discretion that, like the decision guidelines that are given to the planners when they have an application in front of them to consider those matters.
Thank you. Another question for yourself, Alistair and Lisa. Will the level crossing removals happen at the same time as SRL construction? Residents are concerned about some of the construction impacts.
I understand there is at Hyatt, the level crossing will be removed before 2029 or in 2029. So obviously we've got our works at SRL Cheltenham going on through to 2035, so there will certainly be an overlap, but we have a lot of interface with the level crossing team about managing those impacts and understanding their program and how it works with our program. So there certainly will be overlap, and both teams are sort of looking at how to manage those impacts as best possible.
Thank you. Another question around active transport. There's a number of questions that are in a similar vein around some of the concerns about potentially the project overestimating the ability and desire of residents to ride bikes and walk everywhere. Do you have a comment on some of these concerns, whether it's leaning too much towards active transport?
I think from our perspective, it is a balance, and as I said earlier, I don't think we're not pretending that Cheltenham is like Collingwood or whatever. It's a different place, and it is a balance about providing the safe options for people to get around, but mindful that not everyone's going to be riding a bike all the time, every time. There's plenty of trips. My own gymnastics today to get my kids from school and picked up and all of that sort of thing, and all of that before coming here. There's, we all have those, daily pressures in life, and you're not going to ride your bike or walk every time, but it is about providing an opportunity for that, and as we talked about earlier, like the mix of land uses as well, having those local shops, having those local employment options, those other options available, makes it more attractive at those shorter distances.
Yeah, I can talk to the activity centre program. I guess the whole purpose of the program is to provide housing around, within walking distance of, shops, jobs, public transport. So I guess that's fundamental to the program. We're not here to tell people what form of transport they want to use. If they can use whatever form of transport they want, but the future housing will be increasingly in areas where there'll be a lot more choice. So if you live in a home or an apartment within a couple of minutes walk of a train station and you're Woolworths or where else, then chances are you will walk and cycle a lot more than, I guess, the trend has been in the past. So I think it's just that change will innately happen through these strategies in cities all over the world. There's only so much physical space and to fit cars and on roads. So that those physical space constraints are just a natural barrier to everyone's choice. And if you want to be able to get into the city quickly for your job, then you'll need to use public transport increasingly as the population grows.
Thank you. And I know there's been a number of comments from the panel about the different ways people can get involved in further feedback and input. There are a number of questions around that. In particular, the question is, how can I provide input into your plans? And I would also like to know more about the community reference group for North Brighton.
Great. I don't have the details on me, but there will be. Do you want to...
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Neve Moynihan. I'm the Director of Planning, Communications and Engagement from the department. My team are looking after the community engagement program. So I just want to expand on what David shared earlier about how you can get involved. We will be coming out and having 2 drop-in sessions. So we're looking to come out at the end of April. In those sessions, you'll be able to spend time talking with us, providing feedback, but also meeting with our planning team to learn more about the plans and what you can expect to see and engage on over the coming months. We will also be having an online Q&A session, so you'll be able to attend, hear our speakers and ask questions similar to this evening. And an online survey. So we're wanting to engage or provide many opportunities for people to connect and engage with us in a way that works best for you, so either in person or online. For the community reference group process, we are looking to have 50 community members that would represent the centres that are being developed here in Bayside. So that's 50 people who represent different locations from age, gender and home owner type. So it might be someone who owns a home, who's paying a mortgage, who is renting, or someone who wants to live in this area but can't afford to. I say that really meaningfully because there are people who I know who want to live in some of our activity centres, and I think that's an important perspective to hear and balance the conversation. So the point of that is about having a group of people who can come together, and we've put that in between the two board engagement stages. So we're looking at this point in time for July, and one of their big tasks will be to go through all of the data and feedback we collect through April and May, and work with the team to help provide really clear recommendations about what are the things that matter to you most and what are the things that we can look at when the team are working on the plans for each of the centres. We'll then come back out to the community. I think on the slide it was August, September, and we'll repeat the same engagement activities through drop-in sessions, our online question answer session and a survey to seek feedback and check back in. Have we got it right and have we missed anything? So that's the consultation plan for the Activity Centre program. If you would like to learn more at this point, there will be our project email. So we do have a dedicated inbox at this stage, and then we will have an online engagement page as well. So you can connect with us through the project email and we'll respond to your query that way. But yeah, I hope that gives you a little bit more information. I do hope to see you at our drop-in session. So we are wanting to come out and hear from you, and hope to respond to more of your questions about the Activity Centre, but seek your feedback as well. So, thank you.
Thanks, Neve. We've got time for a couple more. I'll just scroll up to our questions. Okay, question for everyone. Thanks again for the further information about engagement. Again, for everybody, no one's been named in particular to respond, but how is mobility being considered in these projects? Will scooters and rideshare be encouraged?
I'm just going to say they're going to answer the question, but I'll just say, will it be encouraged? I hope so, because I ride a scooter.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear the question.
How is mobility being considered in these projects? And will scooters and rideshare be encouraged?
I guess we don't have any specific sort of policy or position around those forms of transport. No.
I might jump in. So we have done in our transport and mobility study quite a bit in relation to different modes of transport, including rideshare and scooters. We do hopefully have someone coming to our session on Monday, so the 4 till 7 block at, I think it's Hyatt Neighbourhood House, who could talk a little bit more to some of those options if people are wanting to have a bit more detail.
Thank you. Excellent. Again, all these questions will be passed back on to you all as well. There are quite a number of questions around improvements on Bay Road. So probably again for the Suburban Rail Loop team, residents are asking why aren't you improving Bay Road Bridge at the same time as the rail line?
I'm going to see what Brenton's up to over there in terms of any updates on Bay Road.
So in terms of, I'm assuming the question relates to was it the rail bridge?
Just says, why aren't you improving Bay Road Bridge at the same time as the rail line?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so the rail bridge improvements aren't part of the scope of the project that we're delivering in terms of the SRL lease, but as I said before, we acknowledge that there are some concerns about the traffic congestion caused by the improvements to the footpaths and the addition of a cycling path under that bridge. So we are looking at options at the moment in terms of how we can better balance the active transport, which has been a common theme tonight, and also the the vehicle traffic as well. So. The LXRP. Okay. Yep. Yeah. Right. Yeah, we'd probably have to take that question on notice because that's managed by the Level Crossing Removal Project, which is a different government authority. But yeah, yeah, we do, but they are a different group of people, and we're not across the details. And I'd hate to tell you the wrong thing, guessing. So yeah, we can definitely take that offline and provide a response maybe via Callie and the team.
Thank you. Got time for another one or two, depending on how the responses to these. There's a question around concerns around everyday tasks becoming more difficult. So the question is, and it's come through a number of different ways online in the room as well. Everyday tasks like driving to the shops or school drop-offs are already difficult. How does adding more high-density apartments to suburbs without proper road infrastructure put the community first?
I suppose that comes back to the basic notion, the issue with the housing targets and why we are seeking to increase the capacity for new homes within existing areas and what that might mean in terms of transport and congestion. It's clear that it's clear, I'm just speaking in general, that if we do grow the population within existing areas, that if we don't want to see additional traffic, then we have to shorten car trips, we have to make some car trips available for cyclists or for walking, and accepting that not everybody will want to do that. So that is part of the logic of putting
I think the answer is probably
I'm really genuinely trying to answer it, because when we look across Melbourne and we look at where we can put homes in a way that makes best use of the infrastructure we have to move people around, putting more homes around areas that have good access to opportunities and services, that have good access to train networks with frequent trains, is the best way to ensure that we can build the homes that future Victorians need in a way that will allow the city to function. On a very simple thing, what will happen in the immediate traffic congestion in a particular area, that's matters that will be typically addressed. I'm sure that my colleagues are addressing that in the structure planning. But at the higher level, and it's not simply that there are if we can't put all the new growth we can't put all the new homes that Victoria needs in the growth areas. It's just not the room. And
I'm happy to have a go at that question. So
we've got a few more minutes left, so if we could just maintain our process for tonight, we'll get through the last question, then we'll wrap up. Thank you.
Yeah. One of the key drivers for the rail infrastructure for the suburban rail loop, so the new stations and the new 6 stations, is it will reduce trips and it will reduce congestion within the precincts. So that's outlined in our SRLA's business and investment case, which has been around for a while now, since 2021. That's also online, and that talks about the benefits of the rail infrastructure in terms of reducing trips. And tonight, Alistair and myself have been here talking about precinct planning, and the precinct planning is leveraging the opportunities in relation to the rail infrastructure.
Thank you. Okay, any comment at the moment? This is probably our final question, given we're nearly on time. Anything to add further? No? Okay, we've got the last question is, and we'll wrap up after this last question, that says, thank you for gathering all our panellists tonight. It says the state government will be responsible authority for approximately 45% of the municipality. How will government continue to tap into local knowledge of council and communities?
In terms of, I guess, the planning language, the responsible authority who's looking after the planning scheme. SRL, like the planning scheme amendment that we've put out, the draft amendment, doesn't propose any changes to the responsible authority. SRL has a role as a planning authority, so we can prepare amendments and things like that, but we're not in the material is advertised. There's no change to the responsible authority, so the day-to-day decision makers.
From the Activity Centre program side, I guess the government has tasked us with updating the planning controls for these 50 centres in a prompt timeframe to enable housing delivery to address the acute housing challenges that many in the community are facing. Aside from those planning changes and facilitating infrastructure collection, etc., the decisions, the council will continue to be the responsible authority for determining planning application decisions.
I'd just add that my colleagues are drawing a distinction which we're all very familiar with in the planning space between responsible authorities which issue the permits or refuse the permits for planning applications, and planning authorities which do the planning. And so if the question is pitched in terms of how planners listen to it, responsible authority, the answer is then council still is responsible for the permit side. Having said that, the state government will be taking on the planning to change the planning schemes, but then it will still be up to council to process the applications under those revised controls.
Thanks for the clarification. Okay, we're nearly on time, so I'd really like to thank everybody for attending tonight and for being patient through this process. We understand there's lots of concerns and questions, and we appreciate you all, our speakers and panellists, for coming out tonight to answer a range of questions. As we said earlier, there'll be a whole lot more of engagement happening, which Niamh outlined, and some of the team has as well. I've got a whole range of contacts here as well to keep informed and updated on each of the plans. Also, Council Bayside has committed to closing the loop with you all tomorrow, so there will be this presentation and the videos online, and all of the questions will be provided back to the agencies for considering how to respond to those for you all. Thanks again for attending, and travel safely. Thanks everyone. Thank you.